My name is Paddy Quinlan, and on behalf of Guildmore, I'd just like to introduce the team that we have assembled for the Ladywell Playtower project. We're very excited to be here. We have had a couple of fun months putting together our proposals here, but we know, of course, that for yourselves, the community, this has been this has been a question of many, many years to get to the point where we see a bit of progress. To give the overview of our team, Guildmore ourselves are developer and main contractor. We have Pringle Richard Sharrett, who are our architects, and we have our cinema operator, Curzon, and we'll go into a little bit more detail as we go through to the contribution of each of those players. So for us, we're here to give you our ideas, but I think what's also really important on a night like tonight is actually hearing what it is you've got to say to us and listening to that. And I think it's fair to say that we like to think we have a little bit of form in that matter. The image on the screen behind us here is Poplar Baths. Some of you may know it. It's in the London Borough of Tower Hamlets, and this is the last production that this team has put together. This was one where the local community got behind a derelict building. Building has sat derelict for 30 years. We're eager to see it saved, got it listed, put the momentum in just as you're doing here to getting it to a point where something happens. And the team together that we did, we listened to what the community were saying. We listened, I think, to what the building was saying as well in terms of what it needed, what it could fit, and what was appropriate for it. And we are very pleased that that building has actually won a New London Award just this year for conservation. And that's a building actually it's open to the public. We'd love any of you to go to Poplar, go for a swim, hop in, see what it's like. But we're not proposing to fill the pool in the play tower with water. I think you're provided for. The community has that provision at the moment. What we are planning to do is provide the cinema. I know we're not the first to propose that this evening, but we will set out a few of the points of differentiation that set ours apart. Curzon, we've gone to who we consider the best in the business to put this to operate this, and Rob in a few moments will talk about that as well. But I think what I'd like to do now is just pass over to Malcolm to maybe go through a bit more of the detail of the proposal.
My name is Malcolm McGregor. I'm a conservation architect, and this was our project in Brixton as well. So there's 3 projects. They've all been award-winning, and this was very much a community-led project for the Black Cultural Archive in the centre and the heart of Brixton. It took us actually 12 years to realise that one. Hopefully this one we can realise faster. I'm going to go straight into the proposals and the ideas. This is a bit bleeded out, this image, but anyway, we want to bring back the heart of our scheme relies on what we see as the most important space. It's the hall space. What are we going to do with the hall space? And we feel that it's very important that hall space is realised in its own. So we worked very hard with Curzon. It's a 3-screen cinema, which I'll show you how we get in there. But we feel that dynamic space is something that needs to be open to the public, that you come into. You can see it'll be the reception space, the cafe area, and we've managed to get the big screen, an 88 screen, as a volume within that space. And we've done that by actually sinking it into the pool. So we sink it into the pool. So actually when you come into that space, when you come into the huge hall space, the entrance where you have the reception, the cafe, and then you cut down and we place that 88 pool screen at the bottom. So you'll actually even be able to see the history of it. You'll be able to see how it sits within the pool, and within the first part will be timber boarding, much as it was. The second screen we've actually sunk into the bottom, where you've seen people of various schemes have been putting things at that bottom part, but we've managed to sit a 66 screen cinema at that rear place. And then we've managed to put another one at front. So here you're seeing that big space at the front, the big screen at the back, and the smaller screen tucked in to that building, where we managed to stack them on top of each other underneath the roofs and the spaces. We've kept both entrances going. There is that entrance at the front into the main pool hall space. And on the left-hand side, we've created a restaurant space. And we've managed to get a lift. We're sort of reorganising the staircase and lift. So we actually want to replace the conical But we're proposing to replace it in its form, but we will use what's called an air source heat. That's what we're thinking of, which will allow for the chilling of the various screens, the 3 screens. So it has a sort of function, and we also want to take people up there. And we've talked about it, we looked at it. You can actually get people up on that lift, which is 2 ways. So it works for the restaurant and for the cinema. Takes you up to the top. It's very tall, that tower. So actually, the lift would take you up to the sort of uppermost level, and then we could create a staircase within the actual tower, so you could actually have a viewing platform at the very top. This is where you're seeing it going up. So you're seeing it in that space with the volume, the big screen in that space, and then the 2 screens at the back. We do have parking on the side, but we'll get onto that later, and we'll talk about the enabling development later. Here you're seeing it sort of from above. We're glazing over the courtyard. The courtyard for us is very central. That's a sort of circulation space for all 3 screens, really. You'll be coming down inside the pool, and for the 2 screens at the back, you'll be circulating around there. And at the front of the sort of that lower area, you've actually got the sanitary and toilet areas as well. And as you can see, here's the conical back, and you've got that lovely space at the top, viewing position at the top. In just touching in terms of enabling, we're very similar to the last one that you've seen, except we've pulled the housing back towards the back of the building, and we've got 4-story housing there. We've gone slightly more on the side between the coroner's court, so that is actually 3 stories on that side there. That's actually a nursery in the lower level with apartment or special care facility above. Here's the nighttime shot. So this is bringing back life to the street, and there you're seeing those 3 entrances open. We're hoping it'll spill out. We're hoping you'll be able to see in. There'll be this sort of golden, glowing place that will attract people to go to, as well as that essential quality of being able to realise that whole space. It was really, I suppose, when we're talking to Curzon and we're talking about cinema, how you do a cinema, and it was this sort of box in box. When you say box in box, I thought, that could be box in box. Is how we came up with the sort of idea of the golden egg that brings it back to life. And then the restaurant on the side, it works. There are these 2 entrances, they're existing, we're not creating anything new. And we've got the lovely restaurant opening up on the left-hand side, and we're putting the kitchens above. And as I say, you go up to the very top. Now, Curzon. Rob, can we talk about the cinema?
Thank you.
You've got.
Make sure it's working.
Yeah, it is. Thank you very much. My name is Robert Kenny. I'm from Curzon Cinemas. Yeah, for sure. I should have remembered that. What I would like to do is just explain what Curzon is about, because we've heard from other cinema operators who may or may not be interested in this building. So what I'd like to do is to tell you a little bit about Curzon, because we're not represented in the south of London. And what I'd like to also do is try and show you what differentiates us from other cinema operators as well. Curzon was first established in 1934. Our first cinema was in Curzon Street in Mayfair. And the current chairman of our company is a person called Roger Wingate. His father, Harold Wingate, founded the original Curzon in 1934. So we've been around for an awful long time. The company remains privately owned, and we're now at the stage where we've got 13 cinemas, mainly in London, but certainly not in South London. There's Southwest London in Richmond and Wimbledon. But mainly London-based. Over the last few years, we have also opened cinemas outside of London in Canterbury, Sheffield, Knutsford and Ripon. But we feel our strength is within London, certainly. In addition to the cinema side of our business, we also have 2 other divisions within the business which are important to us. Curzon Artificial Eye is a distributor of films in the UK, and it's their 40th birthday this year as well. So basically what happens is they will buy the rights to show the films in the UK. We'll show them in our cinemas. We'll show them in other cinemas too. They're mainly foreign language films. The Handmaiden, which is our film, this week has just surpassed a film called Julieta, a Spanish film by Pedro Almodovar, to become the highest grossing foreign language film in the UK in the last 5 years. So we've worked really hard with that film. It's a Korean film. It's a tough watch, but I would recommend that you go and watch it if you want. Or you can see it from next week on our third division of our business, which is Curzon Home Cinema. What's home cinema? It's a streaming service that you might know better as something along the lines of Netflix or Amazon. But the Curzon Home Cinema is, what we try to do with that is something similar to the physical cinemas themselves, and we try to curate it, have a more curated approach to the platform rather than Netflix, where you go on and you find 5 million films and you don't know what to watch. Our home cinema service will only have 500 films, no more than that. This thing on the table in front of us here is a BAFTA, and we were awarded a BAFTA earlier on this year for, now let me get this title right, the Outstanding Contribution to British Cinema. And that is, I hope, a recognition of the work that we've done both as a distributor and an exhibitor, over the last 80 years. So we're a well-established company, even though you might not know us in South East London. What differentiates us from other cinemas? I have to say this, because it was part of my presentation at the beginning of the night. We're an accredited London living wage employer, and we have been since 2014. We're opening, our next cinema to open is in Oxford, and in Oxford what we're doing is we're committing to employ 95% of local people who either live, study or work in Oxford, and we'd be looking to bring something similar to that scheme into Lewisham as well if we were successful. How long have those slides been up for?
Go on. You're doing well.
What I would like to say is that all of our cinemas, none of our cinemas are on retail parks like a multiplex. You might expect a multiplex operator to be on a soulless retail park. We strongly believe in opening cinemas in city centres so that we become a focal point for the community. What we've put up there, this is a cinema that we opened in Canterbury nearly 3 years ago now. We really strongly want the local community to own the cinema itself. So the photograph over to the left is a tea party for somebody local whose house wasn't big enough. So we hired them the bar area in Canterbury. The bottom picture, which you mightn't be able to see there, but that's a special Valentine's evening package that we did for people. And the other picture is just two random guys that walked in. This is a cinema in Sheffield. Over to the left there, this is what we like to do in all of our cinemas. It was a film called The Girl with All the Gifts, which you may guess is a little bit of a horror film. But the author and the screenwriter was a guy that lived local to Sheffield, who approached us and said, could he come along and talk after a screening of the film? So that's what we did in Sheffield, and that's what we like to encourage in most of our cinemas. Top right is, again, that is Jenny from Sheffield, who went along to a local Freshers' Fair. And bottom right, we're back in Canterbury. That is a guy called Phil, who comes in once a week and does piano recitals for anybody who wants to come along and listen. Okay. Again, what we like to do, I keep repeating it, we like to get involved in the community. Top left, that's a charity event that we did with a film called I, Daniel Blake, which we did in association with a local food bank in Canterbury. We put a special screening on. Baby Club on the bottom right, and then the last image was a guy called Denzel Washington, who was at one of our cinemas. I think it was in Mayfair. One last thing I'd like to mention before we go, we're talking to somebody called the Listeners Project, which we think is a fantastic scheme, where there's people who film spaces before they're redeveloped, and then they will, we commission them to make this film, and then the film is screened within the space itself before it's redeveloped. And there's no reason then why we can't go on and do that in the future.
We're running out of time. We're running out of time, but just to get through the heritage part, I mean, you've heard a lot this evening about it. Obviously, the most important point is that big space that we're using. The lovely picture we found here, which is actually this church here, showing the Edwardian sort of, and the Victorian red brick, and unfortunately this church has lost some of its grandness there, but it really shows you the company that we're dealing with, and this slide which you've seen before, which shows the relationship. But what we're trying to do is, we worked a lot, the conservation information done by Lucian in the run-up to this is fantastic, but we will be looking at spaces. So here is just a way internationally recognise how you run and work with conservation, picking out the most important space, being that main hall space, that entrance space, and then running through. So you see here, we would be taking to the roof, the main roof of the space, the play tower, and that front elevation, all the most significant parts that we will be restoring carefully in great detail. Delivery.
Right, and then finally back to the slightly more boring but unfortunately necessary part. Probably the first and last line on this bit is, I think, the only pitch that's put here this evening that is not reliant on external funding. And what does that mean? That means that yes, we're putting in a quantum of enabling development, I think not dissimilar to what's there on other bids, but the result of that, and including substantially residential development and a nursery on the infill site between the two buildings, but the net result of that is, I think, very importantly, we can give a very substantial degree of certainty as to our ability to deliver this scheme by 2020. We're not reliant on the external funders. So therein is the trade-off. There is the enabling development. And I think to talk about, again, reiterating who we are, this is what we found in Poplar in 2012. This is how Poplar now looks, and I really do implore you, go and have a look at this. We are still very, very proud of it, not to blow our own trumpets, but it is something that repays a visit. And for us, we're here trying to imagine, and even our managing director here, who is actually a local, who isn't old enough to have rubbed copper pennies into the brickwork, but he is old enough to have done martial arts in the Playtower. He's equally committed to this. If we can do this at Poplar, here's the now. I want to show in 3 years' time what the after picture for this looks like. So in conclusion, we believe we've got the right solution for this project. We know we have the team that can deliver it, and we hope it's what you want. But we look forward to the feedback. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Andy, could you find us some lights, and then we can ask. Yeah, brilliant. Now we can see who was talking all that time.
That's probably not good.
Put faces to the voices. So we'll do questions from the audience.
I just want to ask about this interesting mix of uses you're talking about. There's a nursery and some care. Something. So you say a bit about how you think it all, why you've gone for those uses and how they work together.
Am I switch on? I am still, yeah, sure. Two elements to the enabling development. At the rear of the site, beside St Mary's Church, is residential apartments, which are part of what is helping to pay for it. On the site in between, we have looked at a few variants. We've looked at residential apartments, but we've also realised that's a sensitive site for the community. It's a site on a run of public buildings. We probably would find a better return out of private residential there, but we've tried to see, is there other uses that give a little bit more back to the community? Not set in stone, but we have been looking at a nursery use, and we're also Our related organisation actually runs care homes for the elderly, so we've been trying to figure out, is there a use of that nature? Now, the two of them aren't the perfect bedfellows, but that's our thought process at the moment. To be confirmed, but it's trying to get in something else in there that isn't purely just a block of apartments. We're trying to get some other uses in there too, but open for feedback on that too.
I mean, I think the nurseries and care homes do work well together. Actually, there's one in Lambeth that's just open. Anyway.
Thank you.
My question actually might be more for you, Gavin, because it applies to all of the presentations, which is, what's the situation with ownership of the land? Does this pass to each of the groups? And also, as all the enabling development, presumably none of this has planning permission yet?
So each of the bidders has put out some suggested proposals for the ownership that they would take of the asset as part of their offer, and that's part of what we'll be assessing. So those offers differ, as you can imagine, but the council is not looking to retain, if you like, a controlling interest. We may retain the freehold. It could be a leasehold development, leasehold disposal. So that is all in the mix, and that's part of what we will be assessing as an officer group when we're thinking about how are these offers different. And you mentioned planning. Obviously, what we're seeing today is all pre-planning stuff. You wouldn't see any of this stuff really until we have a partner or there's someone who has a substantial interest in this building and they want to come out and talk to the community about it as part of developing their planning application. So you're getting a sort of peek of the ideas that are developing here, and you'll still have the full planning process with all that thought about parking and transport and PTAL and housing to follow on. It's a supplementary.
Can I ask what exactly you are planning for behind the bathhouse as the enabling development, and what you talk about it being able to be delivered in 3 years, and that's a reason not to have lottery funding. But would you consider doing less enabling development and getting funding and delivering it a year later?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's something that we tossed over and back as a team, trying to figure out what is the right answer for here. First part of the question, on the rear, we are in the region of 19 to 20 flats, which is broadly similar to what you would have heard earlier as well. And that is 4 stories in height, again, lower than the building on the former police barracks. And again, below tree line, etc. We have a few other visualizations we haven't used here showing the view across the churchyard. And actually, I think if we had them here, I think you would find them, acceptable in that sort of term for the conservation area. But the point, and probably the key reason we went this route, not going heritage funding, is every month and every year that a building like the Playtower sits empty and unused, albeit for good reason, albeit because it's waiting for funding, albeit everyone is putting huge efforts into getting that funding, is another year where it's at risk of the vandals and the arsonists and all the other things that befall buildings when they're left empty. And for us, the key thing of actually saving this building is to also doing it as quickly as possible. And that was our logic.
Any other questions? No? Okay. Great. Well, thanks very much to Guildmore. So